Good evening, Rob. Thanks very much for your time. I'm sure a lot of people are beginning to ask questions now. I mean, December, it was postponed to February. February, now we're told we have to wait a couple more weeks. What do you think is going on there?
Well, I think it's far more complicated than people imagined. I don't think that's...
So you believe that?
I don't think it's... I mean, I think it's... Yes, definitely. It is very complicated. It's a widespread accounting fraud, and it really is the equivalent of South Africa's Enron. So if you want to pick through the books and do it properly and find out exactly what went wrong, this is the time to do it. And you can't, if you're PWC or Steinhoff's board at the stage, you can't afford to have a report coming out that isn't complete and then having more details come out. I think they want to do a final analysis, put the final results out and say this is what happened and that's in the past. That's ideally what they'd like to do. I suppose it'll, we need to wait and see if that actually does happen.
What are your sources telling you? Is it because they have sort of suddenly stumbled upon things that they perhaps didn't think existed, or more information simply, or it's a question simply of more information in very little time?
Well, I think when they first went into Steinhoff, the PWC forensic investigators last year, they did find things they didn't expect. They had war rooms there. They had mountains of documents to go through, and they had computers to look through. And it was, there's a nightmare in terms of accessing that information. But then along the way, they did find things that weren't comfortable. For example, they found out that Marcus Jooste and the former CEO of Steinhoff, Dani van der Merwe, who succeeded him, were actually the owners of the property that was sold to Steinhoff, and that wasn't declared to the board. So the forensic auditors uncovered that, for example. So all these small deals that took place that perhaps weren't disclosed as they should have been, or if there was money disappearing, those things came out. And I think when you start off something like this, you don't quite know what you'll uncover, and I think that's what happened in this case. And they've now pushed it back to April, I think, is when the new results are coming out, and there'll be a summary of the forensic investigation, but I think it's problematic that it might not be the full investigation. Shareholders won't see that initially, and that's going to be problematic because everyone wants to see exactly what went wrong. But Steinhoff's board, in this case, they don't want to show their cards completely. They want to be able to take action themselves, legal action to reclaim the money for themselves. But if they put out the full report, then other shareholders, other people who lost money will then say, well, we'll now lodge our own action against, Marcus Jooste, against these various people that will be named in the report.
So a lot of self-preservation.
Absolutely. I mean, that board, that share price has been decimated, down 96% from its height. So I think self-preservation is the name of the game for them at the moment.
Now, from what you are hearing, Rob, how has the cooperation been? Especially at the foreign jurisdictions, that have had to, really cooperate and give these people the information that they need. Has it been ideal?
From what I've heard, PWC has got a lot of information from overseas, and it's worked pretty well. I mean, PWC has also had to investigate the members of the board because there are people still on that board who were there during the, the moments when all the fraud was happening. So those guys also had to be investigated to make sure that they weren't part of it. And I think those kind of processes, they've had a lot of assistance from the existing board and from jurisdictions overseas. I think the problem with the Steinhoff case at the moment is why the Hawks are being so slack in doing anything, why there's no criminal accountability. And you'd like to imagine that once the forensic report comes out, you'd imagine the Hawks would, or whichever authority is in charge at that stage, would at least act and finally do something about this, because it's a glaring problem. We had a fraud, I suppose it's now 15 months ago, and nobody has so much as had a knock on the door from the Hawks.
I know this is hypothetical, but this brings me to the question of what happens then? What are the implications for both the company and, or perhaps more specifically, the shareholders? I mean, the people who have lost so much money during this whole saga. If it turns out that this report is not as explosive as a lot of people expect it to be.
Yeah, I mean, these are forensic auditors, and they're likely to be quite cautious in the way they express things. So I suppose there is that danger. But, since Marcus Jooste left, since the forensic auditors began investigating, we have had things that do hint at what will be in there. For example, Steinhoff wrote down by half the value of its property portfolio in Europe. It was valued at 2.2 billion euros. They just, decimated half of that and said, actually, it's worth 1.1 billion. So there are certain things that need to be explained. In their previous half-year set of results, they restated it and said, actually, we didn't make this massive profit. We said we actually made a loss. So there are clearly things that went wrong in Steinhoff. So I think they'll have to be accounting for that, and there'll have to be explanations for that. You know, I don't think a company like Steinhoff or any company that's in the top 40 of the JSE goes out and tells investors we're finding accounting irregularities unless they found accounting irregularities.
So even in its mildest form, it'll still be a worthy report?
It'll be interesting to see what they say, and we won't see the full report initially because Steinhoff will want to pursue those individuals who caused that loss themselves before any other investors start that process.
Okay, Rob, that's where we're going to leave it. Thanks very much for coming through. Financial Mail Editor Rob Rose Steinhoff, of course, announcing today that they'll receive the PWC report by the middle of March.